There is a part of you that you were taught to hide. Perhaps it was your anger, your ambition, your jealousy, your need. You buried it early, thinking that to be loved, to be accepted, meant to be good. So you became kind, agreeable, responsible. You played the part well. But the parts of you that were rejected did not die. They retreated. They sank into the unconscious, where they became sharper, darker, more autonomous. This is your shadow, not evil in itself, but made dangerous by your refusal to acknowledge it. When you deny it, you lose the ability to see where your thoughts end and your impulses begin. You might find yourself sabotaging what you want most, resenting those you care for, or reacting in ways you cannot explain. You will call it fate or bad luck, but it is the hand you refuse to see, now gripping the wheel of your life. The unconscious does not tolerate neglect. What you will not face inwardly, you will act out externally. The darkness you suppress becomes the lens through which you see others, the source of your quiet bitterness, the architect of your hidden compulsions. You may become everything you swore you were not, simply because you chose to look away. To turn toward the shadow is not to embrace wickedness. It is to become whole. Only when you can name your darkness can you begin to master it. Until then, it is not you who wears the mask. It is the mask that wears you. There is a deep and quiet danger in becoming what others expect of you. It does not arrive with violence or crisis. It arrives with applause. You follow the rules, meet the milestones, speak in tones that offend no one. You succeed, perhaps even flourish in the eyes of the world. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, something essential within you begins to wither. Conformity in itself is not the enemy. It is the unexamined acceptance of it that wounds the soul. You adopt the beliefs of your family, the customs of your culture, the ambitions of your peers, not because they are true to you, but because you have never dared to ask if they are. The more you fit in, the less you are required to know yourself. The danger lies in how easily you begin to mistake the mask for your face. You play roles so convincingly that eventually you forget there was ever someone underneath. Your words no longer belong to you. Your choices echo the voices of others. And in the silence that follows, your authenticity dies, not in rebellion, but in obedience. To be true to yourself is not to be defiant for its own sake. It is to live in alignment with your own inner law, even when it differs from the world's demands. This requires courage, the courage to be misunderstood, the courage to disappoint, the courage to walk alone. But without this, you do not live. You merely perform a life that was never yours to begin with. There is a temptation that often arrives on the path of awakening, the temptation to rise too quickly. You speak of light, of peace, of transcendence. You wear the language of insight like a robe, believing that to talk of higher truths is to live them. But beneath this surface calm, the old wounds remain, untouched, unhealed, unfaced. This is the danger of spiritual bypassing, though it rarely calls itself that. It is a subtle flight from pain dressed in sacred words. You tell yourself you've moved beyond the anger, the fear, the grief, but it is not resolution, only escape. The wound is still there, festering quietly beneath a veneer of enlightenment. And because you will not turn toward it, it continues to shape you in ways you cannot see. The desire to ascend without first descending is not growth, it is evasion. Before there is light, there is descent into the dark, into the raw and wounded places of your psyche. The soul does not heal by rising above its suffering, but by moving through it. True spirituality is not sanitized. It is earthy, honest, confrontational. It does not flatter the ego, it dismantles it. When the pain of the past is not integrated, it becomes embedded in your beliefs. You preach compassion while judging others for their ignorance. You speak of love while resenting those who trigger your unhealed self. This is not wisdom. This is wounding in disguise. To grow in spirit is to return to what hurts, to tend to the ache without needing to transcend it too quickly. Only then is the transformation real. Only then does the light you carry illuminate rather than blind. There is a strange thing we do when we cannot face what lives within us. We begin to see it everywhere else. The parts of ourselves we reject, deny, or despise do not disappear. Instead, they slip into shadow and look for expression elsewhere. They often find it in others. What you call irritating in another is often a trait you have not yet made peace with in yourself. The arrogance, the selfishness, the neediness. You condemn it outwardly because inwardly it stirs something too uncomfortable to name. And so, instead of owning it, you project it. You say, "That person is manipulative. She's so controlling. He's full of himself," never realizing that you are speaking as much about your own unclaimed nature as theirs. This is not to say the faults of others are illusions, but when your emotional response is disproportionate, when it burns, provokes, or haunts, it is often because something personal has been touched. The trigger is a mirror, and what you see in that mirror is not their sin, but your own fragmentation. Projection is how the unconscious protects the fragile self. It moves what we cannot tolerate inside us to the outside world, where we can battle it without risking our self-possession. But in doing so, it robs us of growth. For as long as you fight your traits in others, you remain split, cut off from wholeness, from the possibility of becoming fully who you are. To begin the work of self-integration, you must gather these fragments. You must ask why certain people disturb you so deeply, why their flaws seem so offensive. Often the answer will not be found in them, but in what they are showing you about yourself. Only by reclaiming these lost parts can you begin to move from reaction to recognition, from judgment to integration, from illusion to truth. There is a voice within you, quiet, steady, incorruptible. It does not shout. It does not beg. It simply knows. It is your inner authority, the compass that points not toward approval, but toward truth. Yet for many that voice is barely heard. It is drowned beneath the noise of applause, expectations, and the ever-hungry need to be seen. The need for validation is not born in strength, it is born in doubt. Somewhere along the way, you learned that to be accepted was safer than to be authentic. You began measuring your worth in the eyes of others. Their praise became your oxygen, their attention your mirror. You shaped your choices around their approval, not because it was right, but because it was rewarded. But here lies the danger. Every time you look outward for affirmation, you abandon your own knowing. You betray your instincts. You silence your intuition. Slowly, your inner life becomes faint, like a forgotten dream. You learn to distrust yourself, to ask others before you act, to second-guess what you feel, to wait for permission to be who you are. This is not humility, it is self-abandonment, and the price is high. Without inner authority, you may succeed outwardly, but feel hollow inside. You may please many and still be lost. The decisions you make may impress, but they will not fulfill, because they did not come from you. They came from a performance crafted to survive. To reclaim inner authority, you must risk disapproval. You must let go of the need to be liked in order to be true. You must sit in the discomfort of not being understood. And in that quiet space, you will hear it again, that voice. It was never gone, only waiting. There is a deep instinct in us to recoil from suffering. We numb it, distract from it, rationalize it, avoid it at any cost. We tell ourselves that pain is a sign something is wrong, that if we are hurting, we must be broken. But this belief is a deception, for suffering is not the enemy of growth, it is its crucible. Real transformation does not come through ease. It does not come through comfort or pleasure or the illusion of perpetual happiness. It comes through descent into grief, into confusion, into the parts of life and self that fracture us. Pain strips away what is inessential. It shatters the false identities we cling to and demands that we rebuild not from who we think we are, but from what is true. When you avoid suffering, you do not escape it. You delay it. You push it into the body, into the psyche, into the future, and in that delay, it grows heavier, more distorted, more demanding. You may decorate your life to distract from it, chase success, pleasure, busyness, but the soul does not forget what it has not faced. Suffering invites you inward. It opens what has been closed. It brings humility, clarity, depth. It confronts you with your limits and, paradoxically, your strength. The wounds you wish to avoid contain the very material from which your wholeness can be formed. This is not romanticism, it is reality. There is no true change without discomfort, no real awakening without first being undone. To walk the path of becoming is to walk through fire, not to be burned, but to be refined. Those who refuse this passage remain unchanged, living lives of surface calm and inward unrest. But those who accept the invitation of suffering find themselves transformed, not in spite of it, but because of it. There is no greater distance than the one between who you are and who you pretend to be. Many live their entire lives without ever crossing that distance. They perform, achieve, smile on cue. They adopt identities shaped by family, culture, survival. They succeed in the eyes of others, and yet they do not know themselves. Beneath the surface, there is a hollow echo where the self should be. To confront the true self is not a matter of curiosity. It is a demand of the soul. The self is not the ego you've polished, not the mask you wear, not the role you play. It is the totality of you, the light and the shadow, the known and the buried. To meet it requires courage. It asks that you sit in silence, stripped of distraction, and ask, who am I when no one is watching? What have I become to be accepted? What have I lost to feel safe? This confrontation is uncomfortable because it dismantles illusion. It reveals the lies you've told yourself to survive. It calls out the borrowed dreams, the hollow routines, the false certainty. It may unsettle everything, and that is the point. For as long as the self is hidden, you are not truly living. You are rehearsing, pretending, surviving. But the longer you avoid this reckoning, the more the illusion hardens. You may begin to believe the performance is the person. You forget there was ever anything underneath. And yet, something in you remains restless, aching, unsatisfied. Not because life has failed you, but because you have failed to inhabit it fully. To confront the self is not to reach perfection. It is to become real. To stand in your own truth, even when it contradicts the story you've been told, even when it costs you comfort, especially when it costs you approval. For only in that truth do you begin to live, not as a character in someone else's script, but as the author of your own becoming. And so the dangers we face are not always loud, not always visible. They do not crash into our lives. They drift in quietly, disguised as safety, comfort, success, and acceptance. But beneath their stillness, they pull us away from the essential task of becoming whole. To live consciously is to turn toward what is hidden, to question what is assumed, to feel what is painful, and to own what is rejected. It is to choose truth over illusion, depth over ease, integrity over image. This path does not promise certainty. It does not offer the approval of the world, but it offers something far greater: authenticity, inner peace, and the quiet, unshakable power of a life lived from the center. The journey inward is not for the faint of heart, but for those willing to walk it, it is the only journey worth taking.